Hey crew, it's Ben and I am back with some more Esoterica. Today we're going to be diving into the works of Rudolf Steiner. That's his name, right? Yes, Rudolf Steiner. This is Theosophy. We are in chapter 1. We are reading aloud and talking about the various topics that come to light by the text. But before we begin, if you are unfamiliar with me, any of my unconventional beliefs, or if at any point in time I lose you in the terminology, there are several playlists that will be linked in the corner above and in the box down below so that you can get a better understanding of me, who I am, and why I stand where I do. A particular note today is almost certainly going to be the unconventional Bible study because we will be dealing with the Trinity in at least part. So let's dive in and begin our exploration of Theosophy. Chapter 1. The Corporeal Being of Man. One learns to know the body of man through the bodily senses, and the way of observing it can differ in no way from that by which one learns to know the other objects perceived by the senses. As one observes minerals, plants, animals, so can one observe man also. He is related to these three forms of existence. Yes, like the minerals, he builds his body out of the materials in nature, the first part of life. Like plants, he grows and propagates his species, the second form. He perceives objects around him and, like the animals, forms on the basis of the impressions they make on his inner experiences. 3 and 4. One may therefore ascribe to man a mineral, a plant, and an animal existence. The difference in the structure of minerals, plants, and animals corresponds with these three forms of existence, and it is this structure, this shape, which one perceives through the senses, and which alone one can call body. But the human body is different from that of the animal. The difference everyone must recognize, whatever may be his opinion in other respects regarding the relationship of man to animals. Even the most radical materialist who denies all soul would not be able to avoid agreeing with the following sentence, which Carus utters in his Organon de Nature and de Gestis. The finer, inner construction of the nervous system, and especially of the brain, remains as yet an unsolved problem to the physiologist and the anatomist, but that this concentration of structure increases more and more in the animal, and in man reaches a stage unequaled in any other being, is a fully established fact. A fact which is of the deepest significance in regard to the spiritual evolution of man, of which, indeed, we may frankly say it is a sufficient explanation. Where, therefore, the structure of the brain has not developed properly, where its smallness and poverty show themselves, as in the case of microcephaly and idiots, it goes without saying that one can as little expect the appearance of original ideas and of knowledge as one can expect propagation of species in person with completely stunted organs of generation. On the other hand, a strong and beautiful construction of the whole person, especially of the brain, will certainly not in itself take the place of genius, but it will, at any rate, supply the first and indispensable requirement for higher knowledge. Just as one ascribes to the human body the three forms of existence, mineral, plant, and animal, one must now ascribe to it yet a fourth, the distinctly human form. Through his mineral form of existence, man is related to everything visible. Through his plant-like form of existence, all beings that grow and propagate their species. And through his animal existence, all those that perceive their surroundings. And by means of external impressions have inner experiences. Through his human form of existence, he constitutes, even in regard to his body alone, a kingdom by himself. This is a fairly good spot to stop and talk just for a minute about the theory of spiritual evolution, which is what I mostly ascribe to. I believe that there are different stages of life, right? I believe that everything has a purpose, and that's down to every single atom ever in existence. It was created specifically by God for a purpose, and sometimes that purpose is to become part of something else. I believe that you start off on the elemental stage, the mineral existence here. That is the first stage of existence. You merely exist. You can't do anything. You're a spot. You are the point that later becomes a line. The next step, the second phase, right, the second level of existence is plants. they assimilate the minerals. They take them and they make them part of themselves. They take it and structure it and grow up. They can't go over there if they don't like where they're at, but they can throw some seeds over there, but they can't decide to move anywheres. That's the second form of existence. You're taking in the minerals and becoming the new. And then you get to the third form, which is the lower animals. Now, these are the animals that can't think. There are a lot of them. They operate on base instinct alone. It is your insects. It is your lower mammals. They partake of the second form of existence as well as the first form of existence, and they take those and they incorporate them into themselves, and they become something new. They become something that grows, but it can also go over there. If it's too sunny right here, they can go lay in the shade. If there's no food right here, they can go find something to eat. If there's no water here, they can go search that out. But they don't really plan for the future. They don't really have the capacity to understand that maybe I need to save some of this food for later. You do see some of that in the animal kingdom, but it's not on the same level that you would see in the other examples. That is the third form of existence, right? You went from the spot into the line that grows up but can't go anywhere, and now you can go somewhere. That is length, width, and breadth, or length, height, and breadth. And then you get to the fourth level, and that is the thinking animals. That's like my dogs, right? It's like cats. It's like animals that can, in small measure, understand and anticipate, right? My dogs know every morning we go walking, so they anticipate the walk every morning. They know that there's a ritual, or not a ritual, but a routine that takes place in the house, and they are part of it. They understand the concept of time, even if they don't have control of time. They do understand that there is something going to happen after this sequence of events, and it's a different sequence of events. So they have a better understanding of the world around them, but they don't fully understand time, right? They have a brief concept of time, the fourth dimension, but they don't really have the understanding, right? They have a little bit of thought, but not really comprehensive thought. And then you get to the fifth level, which is where we are, right? We grow up, we grow out, we move, we can think, and we can plan. That is the fifth level of existence. We have the comprehension of time, not just basic thought, but the understanding of things and time. We understand that the future will happen. We understand that we need to plan for the future. We need to make accommodation for the things that are happening. That's us on the fifth level. Now, the sixth level is slightly above us. This is your messengers, your disincorporeal spirits, those who are spirit guides or anything along that nature. They were what we are, but now they have been incorporated into the next level of existence, and I don't claim to have full comprehension of that. But you see reports of people hearing from the other that there is something coming, right? This is somebody coming and whispering that don't do that, right? Something along those natures. It's not us. It's not our thoughts. It's something. It is what I believe comes next. It is another stage of existence, and it is another level of evolution in the process. And then there's the seventh level, which is where the angels would reside. They have full control of time, both forwards and backwards, the understanding of how things are meant to play out if they don't have the direct role in making that happen. And then the eighth level of existence would be the divinity. It is the one. It is the absolute understanding of all of the things and exactly how they play together. We don't have mastery of either 6, 7, or 8, but we are working on 5 at the current moment. And I believe that when we, as a human species, reaches the next step, then the ones behind us will ascend into where we are. That is pure speculation. I fully admit that I am well into my conspiratorial mind in that, but it definitely makes sense, at least to me. These levels of existence and the harmonics of life seem to correlate with it fairly well. But all of that is talking about the meat suit, the body, the gift that your soul pilots around this plane. So now let's read about the soul of man. The soul being of man differs from his corporality through being his own inner world. This inner world, peculiar to each person, faces one the moment one directs one's attention to the simplest sensation. One finds, in the first place, that no one can know if the other person perceives even the simplest sensation in exactly the same way as one does itself. It is known that there are people who are colorblind. They see things only in different shades of gray. Others are partially colorblind. I am color deficient, according to the U.S. Navy anyway. They are unable, because of this, to perceive certain shades of colors. That would be me. I have trouble with, if you put a pale yellow and a white next to each other, I have trouble distinguishing those. Or a pale blue, like a really, really bright blue and a white, I have trouble distinguishing those. They are unable, because of this, to perceive certain shades of colors. The picture of the world which their eyes give them is different from that of the so-called normal persons, because you don't actually see anything, right? We talk about this a lot because it is an important thing. You don't actually see anything, you see the reflection of things. Unless you look directly at a light source, you aren't seeing the light directly from the source, right? And it's a little bit painful to stare into a light bulb or the sun. But what we see is the reflection of light from other things. You don't ever actually see anything, you see the reflection of it. You see the parts that are not absorbed. So I use my phone case all the time, right? This looks blue. It's not actually blue. What is happening is the white light is hitting this and everything except blue is being absorbed. So it is actually the color of everything except blue. And it reflects the light blue because it has no blue in it. So you actually see the color that it is not. Out of all the colors possible, you see the color it is not. That is an important thing to keep in mind whenever you are dealing with reality at all. And the same holds good in regard to the other senses. It will be seen, therefore, without further elaboration, that even the simple sensations belong to the inner world. I can perceive with my bodily senses the red table, which another person also perceives, but I cannot perceive his sensation of red. One must therefore describe sensation as belonging to the soul. If one grasps this fact alone quite clearly, he will soon cease to regard inner experiences as mere brain processes or something similar. The first result of sensation is feeling. One sensation causes man pleasure, another displeasure. These are the stirrings of his inner soul, his soul life. Man creates in his feelings a second world in addition to that which works on him from without. And a third is added to this, the will. Through it, man reacts on the outer world, and he thereby stamps the impress of his inner being on the outer world. The soul of man, as it were, flows outward in the activities of his will. The actions of the human being differ from the occurrences of outer nature in that they bear the impress of his inner life. In this way, the soul represents what is man's own in contradistinction to the outer world. He receives from the outer world the incitements, but he creates, in responding to these incitements, a world of his own. The corporality becomes the foundation of the soul being of man. You were given the meat suit for the individualized part of divinity that is you. You are not divine, but you are divinely sparked, right? You are a tiny, individualized piece of the God. He who is, was, and always shall be, the creator and sustainer of all life itself. You are a very tiny little individualized piece of that. My conception of that is that God has no concept of grief, because when we die, we go back to him. So what's he going to grieve? He has no concept of pain in the way that we feel it. And so in order to understand the mortal, he made us. And so we are here to have experiences for him. Some of those experiences are pleasant. Some of those experiences are decidedly not pleasant. But the goal of being here is to experience those things and to be able to process them, to overcome the hindrances that are laid at your feet by your soul. God gives you both the capacity to understand suffering and the ability to overcome it. that is through the soul, the individualized piece of you, of him, that makes the decisions for you, the part that is piloting the body, right? The body is not you. This is what you have been given to get around in this 5D space. You are the individualized piece that is making the decisions. You have free will. You have the choices. You are meant to choose. The spiritual being of man. My mouse don't want to act right this morning. The soul being of man is not determined by the body alone. Man does not wander aimlessly and without a goal from one sensation to another. Neither does he act under the influence of every casual incitement directed at him, either from without or through the process of his body. He thinks about his perceptions and his acts. By thinking about his perceptions, he gains knowledge of things. By thinking about his acts, he introduces a reasonable coherence into his life. He knows also that he fulfills his duty as a human being only when he lets himself be guided by correct thinking, in knowledge as well as in acts. The soul of man, therefore, faces a twofold necessity. The laws of the body govern it in accordance with the necessities of nature, but it allows itself to be governed by the laws which guide it to exact thinking because it voluntarily acknowledges their necessity. Nature subjects man to the laws of the change of matter, but he subjects himself to the laws of thought. By this means, he makes himself a member of a higher order than that to which he belongs through his body. And this order is spiritual. The soul is as different from the body as the body is different from the soul, so long as one speaks only of the particles of carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, and oxygen which stir in the body. One has not the soul in view. The soul life begins only when, within the motion of these particles, sensation arises, and one can say, I taste sweetness, or I feel pleasure. Just as little has one the spiritual in view when he considers merely the soul experiences which course through a man who gives himself over entirely to the outer world and his bodily life. Rather is this soul life merely the basis for the spiritual, just as the body is the basis of the soul life. The naturalist, or investigator of nature, has to do with the body, the investigator of the soul, the psychologist, with the soul, and the investigator of the spirit with the spirit. To realize what one is in oneself, and thus become clear as to the difference between body, soul, and spirit, is a requirement which must be demanded from those who wish, by thinking, to enlighten themselves regarding the constitution of man. And so, we get to the third part of the Trinity, and I am not entirely sure that he got it correctly, right? The soul is making the spiritual decisions. The spirit is the becoming, right? You don't really have control over this part. Like, you can, in some small instances, seize control over parts of that. Here's what that means. The soul is the part that keeps you breathing. It is the part that keeps your heart pumping. It is the part that changes your food into the fuel that you use. It is the part that assimilates the various molecules into the corporeal being that you are. So you don't really have control of that, but you can hold your breath. Right? You can raise your heart rate. You can do various things to seize temporary control over the spirit, but you never really have full control over the spirit. What we do when we are talking about the pulling of the energy through your body, which we talk about frequently, especially in the Infinite Integrations playlist, is taking temporary control over that spirit. It is not yours. You don't get to have full mastery over that, but it is something that you can work with. It is something that you can take a little bit of temporary control over, and that is part of the intention of what you are meant to do. You have 7 energetic centers inside of your body and 1 outside of your body through which you can pull energy from around you, from inside of you. You can manipulate it, you can amplify it, you can send it out in concentrated patterns. All of these things are possible through the things that are endowed within you. But it is the spirit that allows that to happen. It is the spirit that changes the now into the next second. Right? You have control of your thoughts, you have control of your body, but the spirit is the time moving forward. It is the processes by which movement is made. right? You can make the decision to move your hands, but unless the energy is invested by the spirit, that doesn't happen. All right, this next section is a little bit longer, so body, soul, and spirit, which are the three, right? I don't think that he got it quite right in his explanations there, and that's understandable. He confused thinking with the spirit. That's not what it is. Man can enlighten himself in a correct way concerning himself only when he grasps the significance of thinking within his being. The brain is the bodily instrument for thinking. Just as man can only see colors with a properly constructed eye, so the suitably constructed brain serves him for thought. The whole body of man is so formed that it receives its crown in the organ of the spirit, the brain. One can understand the construction of the human brain only by observing it in relation to its task, which consists in it being the instrument or tool for the thinking spirit. This is borne out by a comparative survey of the animal world. Among amphibians, we find the brain small in comparison with the spinal cord. In mammals, it is proportionately larger. In man, it is largest in comparison with the rest of the body. There are many prejudices prevalent regarding such statements about thinking as are brought forward here. Many persons are inclined to undervalue thinking and to place higher the warm life of feeling or emotion. Some indeed say it is not by dry thinking, but by warmth of feeling, by the immediate power of the emotions, that one raises oneself to higher knowledge. Persons who speak thus fear to blunt the feelings by clear thinking. This certainly results from the ordinary thinking that refers only to matters of utility. But in the case of thoughts that lead to higher regions of existence, the opposite is the result. There is no feeling and no enthusiasm to be compared with the sentiments of warmth, beauty, and exaltation which are enkindled through the pure, crystal clear thoughts which refer to the higher worlds. For the highest feelings are, as a matter of fact, not those which come of themselves, but those which are gained by energetic and persevering thinking. The human body has a construction adapted to thinking. The same materials and forces which are present in the mineral kingdom are so combined in the human body that by means of these combinations, thought can manifest itself. This mineral construction, formed as a suitable instrument for its work, will be called in the following pages the physical body of man. In theosophical literature, it is called the Sathula Sharira. This organized material construction, with the brain as its center, comes into existence by propagation and reaches its developed form through growth. Propagation and growth man has in common with plants and animals. Propagation and growth distinguish what is living from lifeless mineral. What lives comes forth from the living by means of the germ. The descendant follows the forefathers in the succession of the living. The forces through which a mineral originates we must look for in the materials themselves which compose it. A quartz crystal is formed by the forces united in it and inherent in the silicon and oxygen. The forces which shape an oak tree we must look for in a roundabout way, in the germ of the mother and father plants. The form of the oak is preserved through propagation from forefathers to descendants. There are inner determining forces innate in all that is living. It was a crude view of nature which held that lower animals, even fishes, could evolve out of mud. The form of living... Let's go ahead and stop. I don't believe in Darwin's theory of evolution. I believe that microevolution is a thing, but not macroevolution. By that I mean, we evolve inside of our species, but we don't evolve from other species. Now, you don't have to believe that. I'm not here to argue with you. But I don't believe that there is a biological imperative for humans to have lost the hair covering that supposedly we had. Now, I have a copious amount of hair, right? But I don't have much hair on my arms. I don't have much hair on my trunk. I don't have much hair on my legs. And if it gets cold, I have to cover myself. If it's sunny, I have to cover myself. And that is anti-biological imperative. There is no reason why humanity, if it had indeed evolved from apes or gorillas or chimps or whatever they're saying these days, there's no reason why we would lose that. There's no reproductive imperative that's going to come from that, right? The reproductive imperative is going to be that which is best suited to survive. Well, there is no best suited to survive in the need to make clothing out of the skins of other things. If there was, like, the predators out there would be doing it now, right? There would be wolves running around in sheep's clothing. But while that is an allegory, it is not an actual thing, right? It doesn't actually happen. There is no biological imperative for many of the things that we see within a species, like a giraffe. Like, the fact that a giraffe exists is a pure miracle. It has an elongated neck, if you are unfamiliar, and because of that, its heart has to pump really, really hard. It's got to shoot blood all the way up this neck, and that is a long way to go. But because of that pressure, if it was to dip its head down to drink water like it does every single day, that blood flow would cause its brain to explode. There's just too much pressure. It's got to get all the way up, fighting gravity. And so it has a switch. When its head reaches a certain level, a switch turns off, and the blood flow decreases. It drinks the water, it comes back up, and the blood flow goes back up. By the time that you need that switch, it is already too late for that switch to develop. By the time you get to the point where, if my blood pressure gets any higher, it's going to explode my brain, you can't develop that tool. It's not possible. If it wasn't directly placed in there, there's no way that it happened. There are many examples like that, but that is a very good one, right? And you can talk about what you want, but there is no biological imperative, which is the driving force behind Darwinism. Now, do we evolve inside of our species? Absolutely. If not, I wouldn't be talking to you on a computer. We would still be running around with stones that we picked up off the ground and wasn't able to shape into a tool. Right? The fact that we can make tools is us overcoming the biology. Right? We don't have talons. We don't have the things that hunters in the wild have, and yet we're hunters. We somehow went from this animal with no thought and no comprehension or whatever, and able to hunt and do all of the things that we did, into some animal that doesn't have any fur, so we get cold and we get sunburnt, and we need tools in order to complete our life cycle, in order to do the things that we were meant to do. We have canine teeth. We were meant to eat meat, right? We do eat grains. We have molars, but we have canines to rip teeth. We have incisors to rip flesh. Like, that's what it is there for. So obviously we have been meat eaters for a very long time. There is no biological imperative for needing tools to hunt. Why would we lose the ability to kill things with these? If we are able to outrun them, outlast them, which is definitely a thing, then why are we not able to hunt them with just our hands? Micro and macro makes a big difference. The form of the living passes itself on by means of heredity. The manner in which a living being develops depends on what the father and mother beings it has sprung from, or, in other words, on the species to which it belongs. The materials of which it is composed change continually. The species remains during life and is transmitted to the descendants. Thus, the species is that which conditions the organizing and molding of the materials. This species-forming force will here be called life force. In the Theosophical literature, it is called prana. Just as the mineral forces express themselves in crystals, so the life force expresses itself in the species or form of plant and animal life. The mineral forces are perceived by man by means of the bodily senses, and he can only perceive that for which he has such senses. Without the eye, there is no perception of light. Without the ear, no perception of sound. The lowest order of organic beings has only a kind of sense of touch. For these, there exist only those mineral forces which the sense of touch enables them to become aware. In proportion as the other senses are developed in the higher animals, is the surrounding world richer and more varied for them. It depends, therefore, on the organs of a being whether that which exists in the outer world exists also for the being itself, as perception, as sensation. What is present in the air, as a certain motion, becomes in man the sensation of hearing. Man does not perceive the manifestations of the life force through the ordinary senses. He sees the color of the plants. He smells their perfume. The life force remains hidden from this form of observation. But the ordinary senses have just as little right to deny the existence of the life force as it has the man born blind to deny that colors exist. Colors are there for the person born blind just as soon as he has been operated upon. In the same way, the plants and animals created by the life force, as creating the various species of plants and animals created by it, is present to man as an object of perception as soon as the necessary organ unfolds within him. An entirely new world opens to man through the unfolding of this organ. He now perceives not merely the colors, the odors, etc. of the beings, but these beings themselves. In each plant, in each animal, he perceives, besides the physical form, the life-filled spirit form. In order to have a name for this spirit form, let it be called the ether body or life body. To the investigator of spiritual life, this matter presents itself in the following manner. The ether body is, for him, not merely a product of the materials and forces of the physical body, but a real, independent entity which first calls forth these physical materials and forces into life. One speaks in harmony with the spiritual science when one says, a mere physical body, a crystal, for example, has its form by means of the physical formative forces dwelling within it. A living body does not have its form by means of these forces, for in the moment in which life is extinct in it, and it is given over to the physical forces only, it falls to pieces. The ether body is an organism which preserves the physical body every moment during life from dissolution. In order to see this body, to perceive it in another being, one requires the awakened spiritual eye. We'll get to that. Without this, one can accept its existence as a fact on logical grounds, but one can see it with the spiritual eye as one sees a color with the physical eye. That is true. One should not take offense at the expression ether body. Ether here designates something different from the hypothetical ether of the physicist. It's important to note that this was 1910 and physics was still quite rudimentary. One should regard the thing simply as a name for what is described here. And just as the physical body of man is constructed in conformity with its set task, so is it also in conformity with the ether body of man. One can understand it also only when one observes it in relation to the thinking spirit. The ether body of man differs from that of plants and animals through being organized so as to serve the requirements of the thinking spirit. Just as man belongs to the mineral world through his physical body, he belongs through his ether body to the life world. After death, the physical body dissolves into the mineral world, the ether body into the life world. In theosophical literature, the human ether body, is called linga sharira, but by the word body is designated what in any way gives a being shape or form. The word used in this sense must not be confused with the word body when used to designate physically sensible bodies. Used in this sense, the term body can also be applied to forms which soul and spirit may assume. In the life body, we have something external to man. With the first stirrings of sensation, the inner self responds to the excitations of the outer world. You may trace what one is justified in calling the outer world ever so far, but you will not be able to find the sensation. Rays of light stream into the eye, penetrating till they reach the retina. There they call forth chemical processes in the so-called visual purple. The effect of this stimulus is passed on through the optic nerve to the brain. There, further physical processes arise. One could observe these. Could one observe these, one would see more physical processes, just as elsewhere in the physical world. If I am able to observe the ether body, I will see how the physical brain process is at the same time a life process. But the sensation of blue color, which the recipient of the rays of light has, I can find nowhere in this matter. It arises only within the soul of the recipient. If, therefore, the being of the recipient consisted only of the physical body and the ether body, sensation could not exist. The activity by which sensation becomes a fact differs essentially from the operations of the life force. By that activity, an inner experience is called forth from these operations. Without this activity, there would be a mere life process, such as one observes in plants. If one tries to picture how a human being receives impacts from all sides, one must think of him at the same time as the source of the above-mentioned activity which streams out towards every point from which he received these impacts. Sensations respond in all directions to the impacts. This fountain of activity is to be called the sentient soul. It is the same as that which in theosophical literature is called karma. This sentient soul is just as real as the physical body. If a man stand before me and I disregard his sentient soul by thinking of him merely as a physical body, it is exactly as if I were to call up in my mind, instead of a painting, merely the canvas. All right, we're going to pause here because I'm not sure if it's going to continue on in this vein, and I want to talk about the spirit soul thing here. I call this the subtle energy. Right? I've seen that other places. It's not my term, but it is one that I have definitely adopted. I can see these things, right? You don't have to believe that, and I'm not here to convince you. I'm here to tell you. I can see them. It is through a process of meditative contemplation by which I was able to do so, but I can look at a plant and see the etheric body around it. It does have one. Don't let this fool you at all. And it is easier to recognize in plants than in humans because the way it is designed in humans is different than the way it is designed in plants. It works in a different manner, but it is there for both of them. You can see it for both of them, and it takes intention, will, and dedication to learn how to do so. Prayer, fasting, and meditation make a big difference in this. But it displays itself kind of as a bending of the light around. Some people can see colors. I don't see the colors, right? I see the outline. It looks like a mirage. Like if you look on the road on a hot day down the road and you see the waves coming up off the ground and it looks like it's distorting things, that's what it looks like. It looks like that around you. It looks like that around a tree or a blade of grass or your dog or your cat. It looks the same for the most part. If you are seeing colors, what it seems to be happening is a misalignment of the things. Now, the etheric body, we're going to talk about humans in particular here. The etheric body of the humans, the subtle energy, is the part that's holding you together. I believe that there are 7 internal chakras, right? Starting at base, sacral, solar plexus, heart, throat, third eye, crown. And then there's the divine one, which surrounds you and you have access to when you have proper alignment through here. These are what's holding you together. This is what's making the processes happen. It is the attachment of the electromagnetic energy to these various plexuses of energy within you. There are nerve clusters in these areas. There are definitely concentrations of energetic activity all along the spine. You can, through processes involved in prayer, meditation, and fasting, learn to manipulate this energy within your spinal column. You can pull energy from where it normally resides, which is probably a little bit below your heart, all the way up to your crown, all the way outside of yourself, all the way down to your base, depending on the needs that you have. They also serve purposes. Your intuition is in large part tied to this. If you walk into a room and you see somebody and you're like, oh, that's a bad person, or this is a bad situation, I don't need to be in it. That is your body using your energetic centers to let you know something. You feel that in your gut, right? They call it a gut feeling for a reason. It is your solar plexus acting with one of the other points to let you know, hey, this is not good. The energy disruption within yourself lets you know about what's going on. It is the same when you walk into a room and you see somebody who is extremely attractive, right? You feel that one a little bit lower than your gut. And so these intuitive moments are because of your stack. It is because of the way that the energy within you reacts to the energy without of you. It is taking the divine, which is the one outside of you, and it is interpreting that energy as it processes through you in a way that lets you know what the situation is. And so I do believe that you can see this, right? I can see it, I know. But I believe that you can too. I could be wrong. It could be just me. But evidence seems to show that other people have had the same experience, if not in the same way. And so, once again, while I say that my way is a way, it is not the only way. Other people have achieved the same ends through other means. What I do here is explain the means, right? I am clarifying the fact that this is true. I don't believe that he had a full understanding of the spirit, but that can be me being wrong and not him. And I think that covered everything we needed to talk about with the ethereal, right? The subtle energies, the way that you are constructed. If something else comes up, we will talk about it as it goes. So, a similar statement has to be made in regard to perceiving the sentient soul, as was previously made in reference to the ether body. The bodily organs are blind to it, and blind to it is also the organ by which life as life can be perceived. But just as the ether body is seen by the means of this organ, the inner world of sensation itself can be seen through a still higher organ. A man is not only the senses, the impressions of the physical and life worlds, but he beholds the sensations themselves. Before a man with such an organ, the world of the sensations of another being is spread out like an open and, for him, a legible book. I am learning to read that book. One must distinguish between experiencing one's own sensation world and looking at the sensation world of another. Every man, of course, can see into his own sensation world. Only the seer with the opened spiritual eye can see the sensation world of another. Unless a man be a seer, he knows the sensation world only as an inner one, only as the peculiar hidden experiences of his own soul. With the opened spiritual eye, there shines out before the external spiritual gaze what otherwise lives only in the inner being of another. The sentient soul depends, as regards its activity, on the ether body because it draws from it that which would cause it to gleam forth as sensation. And since the ether body is the life within the physical body, the sentient soul is indirectly dependent upon the latter. Only with correctly functioning and well-constructed eyes are correct color sensations possible. It is in this way that the corporality affects the sentient soul. The latter is thus determined and limited in its spaciousness of the body. It lives, therefore, within the limitations fixed for it by the corporality. The body, accordingly, is built up of mineral materials, is vitalized by the ether body, and limits itself with the sentient soul. So the ether body here is the becoming, right? The part that you can take temporary control of. The sentient soul is the part that makes the decisions, and the body is this. He, therefore, who has the above-mentioned organ for seeing, the sentient soul, sees it limited by the body. But the limits of the sentient soul do not coincide with those of the physical body. The soul extends somewhat beyond it. By this, one sees that it proves itself more powerful than the physical body, that is, the divine chakra. But the force through which its limits are set proceeds from the physical body, so that between the physical body and the ether body on the one hand, and the sentient soul on the other, there inserts itself another distinct member of the human constitution. This is the soul body, or sentient body. It is called in theosophical literature astral shape, or kamarupa. Rupa signifies form or shape. One can also say a part of the ether body is finer than the rest, and this finer part of the ether body forms a unity with the sentient soul, whereas the coarser part forms a kind of unity with the physical body. Nevertheless, the sentient soul extends, as has been said, beyond the soul body. What is here called sensation is only a part of the soul being. The expression sentient soul is chosen for the sake of simplicity. Connected with sensations are the feelings of desire and aversion, impulses, instincts, passions. All this bears the same character of individualized life as do the sensations, and is, like them, dependent on the corporality. Just as the sentient soul enters into mutual action and reaction with the body, so does it also with thinking, with the spirit. Thought, among other things, is of immediate service to it. Man forms thoughts about his sensations. In this way, he enlightens himself regarding the outside world. The child that has burned itself thinks it over, and reaches the thought, fire burns. Also, man does not blindly follow his impulses, instincts, and passions. His thought over them brings about the opportunity by which he can gratify them. What one calls material civilization moves entirely in this direction. It consists in the services which thinking reader renders to the sentient soul. Immeasurable quantities of thought power are directed to this end. It is thought power that has built ships, railways, telegraphs, telephones, and by far the greatest proportion of all this serves only to satisfy the needs of the sentient soul. Thought force permeates the sentient soul in a similar way to that in which the life force permeates the physical body. Life force connects the physical body with forefathers and descendants, and thus brings it under a system of laws which the purely mineral body is in no way concerned. In the same way, thought force brings the soul under a system of laws to which it does not belong as mere sentient soul. Through the sentient soul, man is related to animals. In animals, also, we observe the presence of sensations, impulses, instincts, and passions, but the animal obeys these immediately. They do not, in its case, become interwoven with independent thoughts, transcending the immediate experiences. This is also the case to a certain extent with undeveloped human beings. The mere sentient soul is therefore different from the evolved higher members of the soul which bring thinking into its service. This soul that is served by thought will be designated the intellectual soul. One could call also the emotional thought soul. Theosophical literature calls it kama manas. The intellectual soul permeates the sentient soul. He who has the organ for seeing the soul sees, therefore, the intellectual soul as a separate entity, distinct from the mere sentient soul. By thinking, man is raised above and beyond his own personal life. He acquires something that extends beyond his soul. He comes to take for granted his conviction that the laws of thought are in conformity with the laws of the world, and he feels at home in the world because this conformity exists. This conformity is one of the important facts through which man learns to know his own nature. Man searches in his soul for truth, and through this truth, it is not only the soul that speaks, but the things of the world. That which is recognized as truth by means of thought has an independent significance, which refers to the things of the world and not merely to one's own soul. My delight in the starry heavens is part of my own inner being. The thoughts which I form for myself about the courses of the heavenly bodies have the same significance for the thinking of every other person as they have for mine. It would be absurd to speak of my delight were I not in existence. But it is not in the same way absurd to speak of my thoughts, even without reference to myself. For the truth, which I think today was true yesterday only, also, and will be true tomorrow, although I concern myself with it only today, if a piece of knowledge gives me joy, the joy has significance just so long as it lives in me. The truth of the knowledge has its significance quite independently of joy. By grasping the truth of the soul, the soul connects itself with something that carries its worth in itself. And this worth does not vanish with the feelings of the soul any more than it arose with it. What is really truth neither arises, nor passes away. It has significance which cannot be destroyed. This is not contradicted by the fact that certain human truths have a value which is transitory, inasmuch as they are recognized after a certain period as partial or complete errors. For man must say to himself that truth, after all, exists in itself, although its conceptions are only transient forms of manifestation of the eternal truth. Even he who says, like Lessing, that he contents himself with the eternal striving towards truth because the full, pure truth can, after all, only exist for a God, does not deny the eternity of truth, but establishes it by such an utterance. For only that which has an eternal significance in itself can call forth an eternal striving after it. Were truth not in itself independent, if it acquired its worth and significance through the feelings of the human soul, then it could not be the one common goal for all mankind. One concedes its independent being by the very fact that one wishes to strive after it. And as it is with the truth, so it is with the truly good. The moral good is independent of inclinations and passions, inasmuch as it does not allow itself to be commanded by them, but commands them. Likes and dislikes, desire and loathing belong to the personal soul of man. Duty stands higher than likes and dislikes. Duty may stand so high in the eyes of a man that he will sacrifice his life for its sake. And a man stands the higher the more he has ennobled his inclinations, his likes and dislikes, so that without compulsion or subjection they themselves obey the recognized duty. The moral good has, like truth, its eternal value in itself, and does not receive it from the sentient soul. In causing the self-existent true and good to come to life in his inner being, man raises himself above the mere sentient soul. The eternal spirit shines into this soul. A light is so kindled in it which is imperishable. Insofar as the soul lives in this light, it is a participant of the eternal. It unites its own existence with an eternal existence. What the soul carries within itself of the true and the good is immortal in it. That which shines forth in the soul as eternal is to be called here consciousness soul. Consciousness can be spoken of even in connection with the lower soul stirrings. The most ordinary, everyday sensation is a matter of consciousness. To this extent, animals also have consciousness. The kernel of human consciousness, that is, the soul within the soul, is here meant by consciousness soul. The consciousness soul is accordingly differentiated from the intellectual soul as yet another distinct member of the human soul. I don't believe that. The intellectual soul is still entangled in the sensations, the impulses, the passions, etc. Everyone knows how at first a man holds that to be true which he, owing to his feelings, prefers. Only that truth, however, is permanent, which has freed itself from all taint of such feelings as sympathy and antipathy. The truth is true, even if all personal feelings revolt against it. The part of the soul in which this truth lives will be called consciousness soul. So that, even as one had to distinguish three members in the body, one also has to distinguish three in the soul. Sentient soul, intellectual soul, consciousness soul. And just as the corporality works from below upward with a limiting effect on the soul, so the spiritual works from above downward into it, expanding it. For the more the soul fills itself with the true and the good, the wider and the more comprehensive becomes the eternal in it. To him who is able to see the soul, the splendor which goes out from a human being, because as eternal is expanding, is just as much a reality as the light which streams out from a flame is real to the physical eye. For the seer, the corporeal man, is only a part of the whole man. The body, as the coarsest structure, lies within the others, which interpenetrate both it and the other. The ether body fills the physical body as a double form. Extending beyond this on all sides is to be seen the soul body, astral shape. And beyond this, again, extends the sentient soul, then the intellectual soul, which grows the larger the more it receives into itself the true and the good. For this true and good cause the expansion of the intellectual soul. A man living only and entirely according to his inclinations, his likes and dislikes, would have an intellectual soul whose limits coincide with those of his sentient soul. These organizations, in the midst of which the physical human body appears, as if in a cloud, are called the human aura. And here's where we're going to go ahead and pause it. I was wanting to make sure I got the full context. I don't hold this. Right? I do believe that there is an aura, right? It is the divine chakra. That is your aura. It is these working in concert with the emanations that which hold you together. I don't believe that there are the separate distinctions here. I believe that that is part of the process, right? What he is attempting to describe here is part of the process, but it is all contained within the one soul. You don't have to have sentient and intelligent and that's not necessary. Your understanding enables you to become more, right? If I was to train my body physically, I would become stronger, I would become faster, I would become more able to do things. If you train your soul in a like manner, it becomes more able to do things. If you are practicing prayer, fasting, and meditation, you become better at sensing the soul and moving the energies and understanding the things that are being told to you by source. That is true. But it's not while it is a process, it is not something that is differentiated in this particular way, right? The soul is the soul is the soul. All of that into one. The growth, the consciousness, all of that is part of it, absolutely, but again, not separated into three. There is a tendency to try to overcomplicate things, and that appears to be what is going on here, right? This was over 100 years ago. This was in 1910, I believe it was when this particular book was written, so we're talking about before World War I. The understanding of things was less at that point in time. And he was attempting to understand something that was a little bit beyond his understanding. Now, I don't doubt that he saw this, right? He saw this aura. And it can present itself in different ways depending on where you are. So my aura is going to look completely different from somebody who has zero spiritual experience in the manner that I do. My particular aura expands quite a distance away from me. It is influential. When I walk close to you, you will be like, you won't understand what's going on most of the time. But if I am intentional about it, it can be quite disconcerting, right? It is literally what they consider aura these days. I can walk up with anger in my face and you're going to know it. I can walk up with love in my face and they can know it because I project that, right? Whatever it is, I automatically project it because I have been working on this. And it will look different, right? If somebody who has not been working on it, their aura is not going to extend as far. It's just not going to do it because they haven't put the energy into it to make it do so. So theirs is going to look significantly smaller than mine. It might have different shading than mine. But that doesn't mean that it is a different thing. It's the same thing, it's just at a different level of growth. If I work my muscles, they get bigger than other people's. That is just how it works. And so while he is not completely wrong, I don't hold completely with this. And I'm saying this as somebody who does this, right? Like I do this aura work every single day when I'm doing my walk. Right? We talk about the walk all the time. It is part of how I got to where I am. But there are trees that I watch specifically through the changing of the seasons to see how their aura changes. I do it with my dogs. I do it with my family. I look and see how their auras are. I still don't have full level of mastery over this, right? This is a process. It is a path which I am on and I am learning to do things with. But I can tell the difference between people. I can see the difference in your spiritual growth. And I understand what he's talking about here. I just don't define it like this. This is overcomplicated. All right, back to the text. In the course of the childhood of a human being, there comes a moment in which, for the first time, he feels himself to be an independent being, distinct from the whole rest of the world. For persons with finely strung natures, it is a significant experience. The poet John Paul says in his autobiography, "I shall never forget the event which took place within me, hitherto narrated to no one, and of which I can give place and time, when I stood present at the birth of my self-consciousness. As a very small child, I stood at the door of the house one morning, looking towards the wood pile on my left, when suddenly the inner revelation, I am an I, came to me like a flash of lightning from heaven, and it has remained shining ever since. In that moment, my ego had seen itself for the first time and forever. Any deception of memory is hardly to be conceived as possible here, for no narrations by outsiders could have introduced additions to an occurrence which took place in the Holy of Holies of a human being, and of which the novelty alone gave permanence to such everyday surroundings. It is known that little children say to themselves, 'Charles is good, Mary wishes to have this.' They speak of themselves as if of others because they have not yet become conscious of their independent existence, because the consciousness of the self is not yet born in them. Through self-consciousness, man describes himself as an independent being, separate from all others, as I. In his I, man brings together all that he experiences as a being in body and soul. Body and soul are the carriers of the ego, or I. In them, it acts. Just as the physical body has its center in the brain, so has the soul its center in the ego. Man is aroused by sensations, to sensations by impacts from without. Feelings manifest themselves as the effects of the outer world. The will relates itself to the outside world in that it realizes itself in external actions. The ego, as the peculiar and essential being of man, remains quite invisible. Excellently, therefore, does John Paul call a man's recognition of his ego an occurrence taking place only in the veiled holy of holies of a man. For with his I, man is quite alone, and this I is the man himself. That justifies him in regarding his ego as his true being. He may, therefore, describe his body and his soul as the sheaths, or veils, within which he lives, and he may describe them as his tools through which he acts. We talk about tools all the time. In the course of his evolution, he learns to regard these tools ever more and more as the servants of his ego. The little word I, German, ich, as it is used, for example, in the English and German languages, is a name which refers from all other names. It differs from all other names. Anyone who reflects in an appropriate manner on the nature of this name will find that it forms an avenue to the understanding of the human being in a deeper sense. Any other name can be applied to its corresponding object by all the men in the same way. Anybody can call a table, table, or a chair, chair, but this is not so with the name I. No one can use it in referring to another person. Each one can call only himself I. Never can the name I reach my ears from outside when it refers to me, only from within. Only through itself can the soul refer to itself as I. When the human being, therefore, says I to himself, something begins to speak in him that has nothing to do with any one of the worlds from which the sheaths so far mentioned are taken. The I becomes ever more and more ruler of body and soul. This also comes to visible expression in the aura. The more the I is lord over body and soul, the more numerous and complex are its members, and the more varied and rich are the colors of the aura. This effect of the I on the aura can be seen by the seeing person. The I itself is invisible even to him. This remains truly within the veiled holy of holies of a man. But the I absorbs into itself the rays of light which flames forth in a man as eternal light, and he gathers together the experiences of body and soul in the I. He also causes the thoughts of truth and goodness to stream into the I. The phenomena of the senses reveal themselves to the I from the one side, and the spirit reveals itself from the other. Body and soul yield themselves up to the I in order to serve it, but the I yields itself up to the spirit in order that it may be filled by it. The I lives in the body and soul, but the spirit lives in the I. And see, I hold different on that. And what there is of spirit in the I is eternal. For the I receives its nature and significance from that with which it is bound up. Inasmuch that as it lives in the physical body, it is subject to the laws of the mineral world, through its ether body to the laws of propagation and growth, by virtue of the sentient and intellectual souls to the laws of the soul world. In so far as it receives the spiritual into itself, it is subject to the laws of the spirit. That which the mineral laws and the life laws construct come into being and vanishes, but the spirit has nothing to do with becoming and perishing. The I lives in the soul, although the highest manifestations of the I belong to the consciousness soul. One must nevertheless say that this I, raying out from it, fills the whole of the soul, and through the soul affects the body. The I is the soul, not the spirit. And in the I, the spirit is alive. The spirit is the becoming. It rays into it and lives in it as a sheath or veil, just as the I lives in its sheaths, the body and the soul. The spirit develops the I from within outward. The mineral world develops it from without inward. The spirit forming an I and living as I will be called spirit self, because it manifested as the I, or ego, or self of man. Spirit self signifies the same as that which in theosophical literature is called higher manas. The Sanskrit word manas is related to the English word man, and the German word Mensch, and signifies the human being in so far as he is a spiritual being. The difference between the spirit self and the consciousness soul can be made clear in the following way. The consciousness soul is the bearer of the self-existent truth, which is independent of all antipathy and sympathy. The spirit self bears within it the same truth, but taken up into and enclosed by the I, individualized by the latter and absorbed into the independent being of the man. It is through the eternal truth, becoming thus individualized and bound up into one being with the I, that the I itself attains to eternity. The spirit self is a revelation of the spiritual world within the I, just as from the other side sensations are a revelation of the physical world within the I. In that which is red, green, light, dark, hard, soft, warm, cold, one recognizes the revelations of the corporal world, in what is true and good, the revelations of the spiritual world. In the same sense in which the revelation of the corporeal world is called sensation, let the revelation of the spiritual be called intuition. We got a whole playlist on the difference between them two. Even the most simple thought contains intuition, right? The MBTI playlist, the Infinite Integrations playlist, the MBTI parts, they all contain the difference between sensation and intuition. Even the most simple thought contains intuition, for one cannot touch it with the hands or see it with the eyes. one must receive its revelation from the spirit through the eye. If an undeveloped and a developed man look at a plant, there lives in the eye of the one something quite different from that which is in the ego of the other. And yet, the sensations of both are called forth by the same object. The difference lies in this, that the one can make far more perfect thoughts about the object than the other can. If objects revealed themselves through sensation alone, there could be no progress in spiritual development. Even the savage is affected by nature, but the laws of nature reveal themselves only to the thoughts, fructified by intuition of the more highly developed man. The excitations from the outer world are felt even by the child as incentives to the will, but the commandments of the morally good disclose themselves to him in the course of his development only as he learns to live in the spirit and understand its revelations. Just as there could be no color sensations without physical eyes, there could be no intuitions without the higher thinking of the spirit self. And as little as the sensation creates the plan on which the color appears, does intuition call the spiritual realities about which it is merely giving information. The I of man, which comes to life in the soul, draws in messages from above, from the spirit world through intuitions, just as through sensations it draws in messages from the physical world. By doing this, it makes the spirit world the individualized life of its own soul, even as it does the physical world by means of the senses. The soul, or the I, flaming forth in it, opens its portals on two sides, towards the corporal and towards the spiritual. Imagine that, top and bottom. We talk about that. Now, as just the physical world can only give information about itself to the ego, because it builds out of the physical materials and forces a body in which the conscious soul can live and possess organs for perceiving the corporeal world outside itself. So the spiritual world builds, with its spiritual materials and spiritual forces, a spirit body in which the I can live and, through intentions, perceive the spiritual. It is evident that the expression spirit body contains a contradiction, according to the literal meaning of the word. It is only to be used in order to direct attention to what in the spiritual regions correspond to the body of man in the physical. Just as within the physical world each human body is built up as a separate being, so is the spirit body within the spirit world. In the spirit world there is for man an inner and an outer, just as there is in the physical world. As man takes in the materials of the physical world around him and assimilates them within his physical body, so does he take the spiritual from the spiritual environment and make it his own. The spiritual is the eternal nourishment of man. And as man is born of the physical world, he is also born of the spirit through the eternal laws of the true and the good. He is separated from the spirit world outside of him as he is separated from the whole physical world as an independent being. This independent spiritual being is called the spirit man. It is the same as that which is called Atma in the Theosophical literature. If we examine the human physical body, we find the same materials and forces in it as we find outside it in the rest of the physical world. It is the same with the spirit man. In it pulsate the elements of the external spirit world. In it, the forces of the rest of the spirit world are active. As a being within the physical skin becomes a self-contained entity, living and feeling, so also in the spirit world. The spiritual skin, which separates the spirit of man from the uniform spirit world, makes him an independent being within it, living a life within himself and perceiving intuitively the spiritual content of the world. This spiritual skin will be called spirit sheath. In theosophical literature, it is called auric sheath. It must be kept clearly in mind that the spiritual skin expands continually with the advancing human evolution, so that the spiritual individuality of man, his auric sheath, is capable of enlargement to an unlimited extent. We were just talking about that. I'm not going to, we're coming back to the I in a little bit, but I don't need to come back to that, right? The spirit man lives within this spirit sheath. It is built up by the spiritual life force in the same way as the physical body by the physical life force. In a similar way to that in which one speaks of an ether body, one must therefore speak of an ether spirit in reference to the spirit man. Let this ether spirit be called life spirit. The spiritual being of man, therefore, is composed of three parts: spirit man, life spirit, and spirit self. Atma, Buddhi, and Manas are the corresponding expressions in theosophical literature. For Buddhi is the separated special life spirit, which is formed by the spiritual life force, or Buddhi, again overcomplicating something that does not need it. For him who is a seer in the spiritual regions, this spiritual being of man is a perceptible reality, as the higher, truly spiritual part of the aura. He sees the spirit man as life spirit within the spirit sheath, and he sees how this life spirit grows continually larger by taking in spiritual nourishment from the spiritual external world. Further, he sees how the spirit sheath continually increases, widens out through what is brought into it, and how the spirit man becomes ever larger and larger. For the difference between the spiritual and physical being of man is that the latter has a limited size, while the former can grow to an unlimited extent. Whatever of spiritual nourishment is absorbed has an eternal worth. The human aura is accordingly composed of two interpenetrating parts. Color and form are given to the one by the physical existence of man, and to the other by his spiritual existence. The ego forms the separation between them in this way that, while the physical, after its own manner, gives itself to building up a body, which allows the soul to live and expand in it, and the ego gives itself to allowing to live and develop in it, the spirit which now for its part permeates the soul and gives it the goal in the spirit world. Through the body, the soul is enclosed in the physical. Through the spirit man, there grow wings for its moving in the spiritual world. In order to comprehend the whole man, one must think of him as formed up of the components above mentioned. The three of them. The body builds itself out of the world of physical matter in such a way that the construction is adapted to the requirements of the thinking ego. It is penetrated with the life force and thereby becomes either ether or life body. As such, it opens itself through the sense organs towards the outer world and becomes the soul body. This is the sentient soul. The sentient soul permeates and becomes one with. The sentient soul does not merely receive the impacts of the outer world as sensations. It has its own inner life, which fructifies through thinking on the one hand, as it does through sensations on the other. In this way, it becomes the intellectual soul. It is able to do this by opening itself up to the intuitions from above, as it does to the sensations from below. Let's find that balance, right? There's two paths. Thus it becomes the consciousness soul. This is possible to it because the spirit world builds into it the organs of intuition. We just talked about that too. Just as the physical body builds into it the sense organs. As the senses transmit sensations by means of the soul body, the spirit transmits it to intuitions through the organ of intuition. The spirit man is therefore linked into a unity with the consciousness soul, just as the physical body is with the sentient soul and the soul body. Consciousness soul and spirit self form a unity. In this unity, the spirit man lives as a life spirit, just as the ether body forms the bodily basis for the soul body. As the physical body is enclosed in the physical skin, so is the spirit man in the spirit sheath. The members of the whole man are as follows: physical body, ether body, soul body, sentient soul, intellectual soul, consciousness soul, spirit self, life spirit, spirit man. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. No. Like it was already wrong, but it's even more wrong. It's got 9 and not 8. Soul body, C, and sentient soul, D, are a unity in the earthly man. In the same way are consciousness soul, F, and spirit soul, self, G, a unity. Thus, there come to be 7 parts in the earthly man. That makes a lot more sense. The expressions used in theosophical literature are as follows. Physical body, stutula sharira. Ether body or life body, linga shirira. Sentient soul body, astral body, kama rupa. Intellectual soul, lower manas, kama manas. Spirit-filled consciousness soul, higher manas. Life spirit, spiritual body, buddhi. Spirit man, atma. The eye flashes forth and the soul receives the infusion from the spirit and thereby becomes the bearer of the spirit man. It is important to note also that there is an 8th overarching, completing part to that. Through this, man participates in the 3 worlds, the physical, the spiritual, or the soul and the spiritual. He takes root in the physical world through his physical body, ether body and soul body, and flowers through the spirit self, life spirit, and spirit man up into the spiritual world. The stalk, however, which takes root in the one and flowers in the other, is the soul itself. One can express this arrangement of the members of man in a simplified way, but one entirely consistent with the above. Although the human I flashes forth in the consciousness soul, it nevertheless penetrates the whole soul being. The parts of this soul being are not as distinctly separate as are the limbs of the body. They penetrate each other in a higher sense. If, then, you hold clearly in view the intellectual soul and the consciousness soul as the 2 members united to form the bearer of the I, and this I as their kernel, one can divide man into physical body, life body, and astral body, and I. The expression astral body designates here what is formed by the soul body and sentient soul together, although the sentient soul is in a certain respect energized by the I. When now the I penetrates itself with the spirit self, this spirit self comes into evidence in the transmutation of the astral body by a force within the soul. In the astral body there are primarily active the impulses, desires, and passions of man. Insofar as they are felt by him, the physical perceptions also take effect in it. Physical perceptions arise through the soul body as a member in man, which comes to him from the external world. Impulses, desires, and passions, etc., arise in the sentient soul, insofar as it is energized by the soul, before the latter has yielded itself to the spirit. If the I penetrates itself with spirit self, the soul proceeds to energize the astral body with this spirit self. This expresses itself in the illumination of the impulses, desires, and passions by what the I has received from the spirit. The I has, then, through the power it gains as a partaker of the spiritual world, become ruler in the world of impulses, desires, etc. In proportion to the extent to which it has become, the spirit self appears in the astral body, and the astral body becomes thereby transmuted. The astral body itself then becomes visible as a 2-membered body, the untransmuted and a transmuted. One can therefore designate the spirit self as manifested in man as transmuted astral body. A similar process takes place in the person when he receives the life spirit into his I. The life body then becomes transmuted. It becomes penetrated with the life spirit, and the life spirit reveals itself in that life body, becomes quite other than it was. For this reason, one can also say that life spirit is transmuted life body, and if the I receives the spirit man, it thereby receives the strong force with which to penetrate the physical body. Naturally, that part of the physical body, thus transmuted, is not perceptible to the physical senses. It is, in fact, just that part of the physical body which has been spiritualized and that has become the spirit man. The physical body is then present to the physical senses as physical, and insofar as this physical is spiritualized, it has to be perceived by spiritual faculties of perception. To the external senses, the physical, even when penetrated by the spiritual, appears to be merely sensible. Taking all this as a basis, one can have also the following arrangement of the members of man. the physical body, the life body, the astral body, the I as a soul kernel, spirit, self as transmuted astral body, life spirit, life body, and spirit man, physical body. And so we have, again, 7, which leads into 8. And that's going to bring us to the end of this particular discussion. We're going to fall back really quick to the I, right? The I is the soul. That is you. This is who you are. You are the individualized, tiny little fragment of the divinity that makes the decisions for the meat suit. You navigate the body. You are not the body. You use the spirit, but you are not the spirit. You, the I, is the part making the decisions. It is the part inside of here. Right? It is the part that you can move up and down. Right? The spirit is the process by which the becoming is, but the individualized piece of you that makes the decisions is the part that chooses to move this stuff up and down. It is the part that you can change your perception in. This is a little bit of a hard concept for some people, but your awareness moves. If you're really hungry, you become your stomach, right? If you are really angry, you become your base. You are almost separated from yourself in a fit of rage or jealousy or whatever it happens to be. You, as a consciousness, can move yourself up and down through your spinal column, through the 7 chakras, and even out into the divine on the outside of you. You can separate your consciousness from the physical and have an awareness outside of yourself. Some people call it astral projection. Some people call it far seeing. Some people have different names for clairvoyance. It is you consciously choosing to move you outside of you. One of the ways by which you can accomplish this thing is the I am statements. Right? I have a whole video on the I am. It is part of how manifestation works. You, as you, decide something and you state it. You create it through the intentional toroid which comes out of your mouth. Right? When you speak, the air that comes out shapes itself around your tongue into a toroid, which then envelops you and you become. So if you are saying, I am bad, you are bad. But if you are saying, I am better, you are becoming better. Right? I am a teacher. I am a healer. I am an employer. I am whatever it happens to be. If you are reinforcing these things to yourself, then that is what you are becoming. You are feeding the spirit with your intention, and so the body has no choice but to follow. You can do that intentionally through the use of the 7 chakras and the 8th. There are 3 lower, there are 3 upper, and 1 right here in the middle that holds it all together, and then the 1 on the outside which really holds it all together. You receive energy from the top and the bottom. You kind of do from all of them, but you really do from the top and the bottom. There is the grounding, receptive, generative force that is the feminine towards the bottom, and people tend to think of it as black. And then you have the energetic, penetrative, creative force from the top, and people tend to think of that as masculine and white. You have control over both of these flows of energy, and you are meant to find the balance therein, right? You're not meant to be held down in the bottom like we've seen all the way through the secret teachings of all ages. You are not meant to be all in the top either. You're meant to be balancing these 2 forces, the light and the dark, Boaz and Jachin. The process by which you do that is by going through the virtues and the vices and equalizing them, right? You're not meant to be greedy. You're not meant to be charitable. You're meant to be the middle, right? You're not meant to value the mortal in overly consumptive ways, but you're not meant to just give away everything and not have anything. Life's meant to be a balance. You're meant to have some things, not everything. It is the same with all of the virtues and all of the vices. There is a correspondence between them, and there is a balance that must be stricken between them. Part of that is the I am statements. You can, through intentionality, and I have described it in other places, and this is getting kind of long, so I'm not going to do it here, but you can direct that energy in particular ways using the bottom and the top through the heart into the becoming and effect change in your life. I say this with some authority because I have done it. You can go back into my videos from a year ago or 2 years ago or however long you wish, anything over about 6 months or so, and you will see me with a much weaker voice. You will see me struggling to talk. You will not be able to hear the things that I'm saying. I had a cyst in my throat. It was pushing on my vocal cords. It stretched them out. This is vocal therapy, what we do here. But through the direction of this energy, by God, right? Like, God gives you the power to use it. It is His power. It is Him making it happen, but it is you deciding to make it happen, and that is what I did. I took the energy, and I moved it to here, and I got rid of the thing in my throat. It is by the will of God. It is through the express will of God that you are able to do these things. But that is what happened. It is your consciousness choosing to do it. The individualized peace of God allows you access to the Spirit. Not fully. You don't get to hold on to it, but you do get to direct it. And part of that is through the I am statements. Those are extremely important. The things that you say about yourself become your reality. If you are saying every day, I'm stupid, or this is going to be a terrible day, that will be your reality. And if you say the opposite, that will be your reality too. So part of what we are doing here is exposing the fact that you do have that power, right? This is to bring to light the various topics so that we can discuss the means by which you can do these things. I have talked about them before, but we are going to talk about them quite extensively going forward through these different books. It's hard for me because I don't like repeating information, right? That's why I have so many playlists so that I can point back to them. But that is what we're doing. That is why we're here. So I have to force myself to do that. But that's where we're going to go ahead and wrap this one up. Hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion to a series of somewhat difficult topics. Unnecessarily complicated in a lot of places, right? There's a whole lot here that I don't necessarily hold to, although it is based in fact, that I believe is fact, in my conspiratorial mind. It's not quite explained in the way that I would explain it. Doesn't mean that it's wrong. Doesn't mean that I'm right. It means that the way that I have found in which to do these things is different than the way that he found in which to do these things. My way is a lot less complicated. And so I feel like it is more correct. The more complicated you have to make it, the less correct it is likely to be. If you like what I'm doing over here, let me know down below. Give me a like, share, and a sub. Throw me a comment if you agree or disagree. If it remains respectful, it gets to remain up. And if you really like what I'm doing, hit me with that super thanks, because I am not a communist. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you are here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you. You are perfect, whole, and complete, just the way that you are. And this has been Pitt's Take. Peace.